inspires in the male attraction, as it were, what former President Carter might call lust in the heart.
But what are you saying?
That one and the same thing occurring in the environment give rise in awareness to quite different objects for different organisms, depending on their biological types. These sensations become incorporated into perceptions of objects not merely according to what things are in the surroundings, but especially according to how the sensations are interrelated within the experience of the perceiving animal as part of its total objective world.
So this is what you meant when you said that objective worlds are species-specific.
That's exactly so. Every organism in its body is one subjectivity among others, a thing interacting physically with other things in the environment. But if the organism is a cognitive organism, its body has specialized parts suited to a psychological as well as a physiological response to those physical environmental aspects proportioned to the organ of sense. The psychological response in those cases is no less subjective, no less inside the organism than the physical effects of the interaction. But the psychological effect gives rise to a cognitive relation, a relation of awareness of something in the environment. But what is that something? The organism, according to its own nature and past experiences, attaches a value to the stimulus and relates that stimulus to its own needs and desires. In other words, the mere stimulus of a sensation becomes incorporated objectively into a whole network of experience wherein it acquires a meaning.
But that's subjectivism. Values are real, objective, not subjective. You're making them subjective.
Pay attention. Of course the values are objective. Anything existing within awareness is objective. They are also bound up with the subjectivity of the physical environment, both in the being proper to whatever is the source of the stimulus and in the being of the cognizing organism. I mean, insofar as the subjectivity of the physical world bespeaks a being independently of whatever I may know, feel, believe, the values partake of that being. But as values, they reveal more the being of the organism evaluating than the subjective nature of the stimulus in the environment. They belong as values to the species-specific objective world of the experiencing organism.
This is troubling.
Let me put you at ease. In order for an organism to be aware of something outside of itself, there must be inside itself a disposition or state on the basis of which it is related cognitively, and I would add affectively, to that outside other. If the outside other has an existence of its own quite independent of the cognition of the cognizing organism, then it is a thing indeed. But insofar as it becomes known, it is an object, the terminus of a relation founded upon the psychological states inside the organism. Neither the relation nor the thing become object are inside the knower. All that is inside the knower is the disposition or state presupposed for the thing to exist as known. And the relation is inside neither the knower nor the known, but is over and above both of them. Compared to the subjectivity of either the knower or the known, the relation is as such suprasubjective. But as related cognitively to the knower, the thing known is the terminus of a relation founded in the knower's own subjectivity. As terminating the relation is an object, the same object, if and insofar as it has a subjective being of its own, is not merely an object, but also a thing.
But what if the object has no subjectivity proper to it?
Then it is only an object. What the scholastic realists used to call a mind-dependent being. So do pay attention. Every mind-dependent being is an objective reality or being. But not every objective reality is a mind-dependent being. Some objects are also things, in which case they are mind-independent beings as well as objective realities.
But I thought an ens rationis, what you call a mind-dependent being, was a mere mental reality, a psychological state like error or delusion.
Hardly. I mean, surely you recall that according to the scholastic realists, so beloved of Peirce, logical entities are all entia rationis, and the relations of logic are supremely public, binding upon all. Now, it is true that logic reveals to us only the consequences of our beliefs, of our thinking that things are this way or that, not necessarily how things are in their independent being. But the fact that logical relations are public realities, not private ones, that logical relations reveal inescapable consequences of this or that belief, not private whims, already tells you that they belong to the Umwelt, not the Innenwelt, and to the Umwelt of a species specifically human at that.
Umwelt? Innenwelt? Where does that come from?
Surely you will allow for more subtlety than that as regards definitions. Your questions cut to the heart of the matter. Consider the bone of a dinosaur, which is known as such. It functions in the awareness of the paleontologist as a sign. He recognizes it, let us say, as the bone of an apatosaurus. Now consider that same bone chanced upon by a Roman soldier in the last century BC. Now, whatever it signified, if anything, to the soldier, it did not signify an apatosaurus. Agreed?
Agreed. In those circumstances, it was more of an object than a sign, not a fossil at all, so to speak.
And yet it was a fossil, waiting to be seen through the right eyes. It was not an apatosaurus sign to someone there and then in the last century, but it remained that it was prospectively such a sign for a future observer.
Yes, but that prospective signification was to someone, not to something.
You raise the difficult question of whether the to or for which of a sign need always be a cognitive organism or not. Let me acknowledge the difficulty of that question, but not try to answer it now. Suffice it to say, for the moment at least, that when an organism interprets something as a sign, that interpretation is required to complete the sign's signification as something actual here and now.
But I can see that. A sign requires an interpretation if it is to succeed as a sign and not just some dumb object. But I don't see how an inorganic substance can provide an interpretation. Come on.
So pay attention now. What you call a sign, which I will shortly manifest as a loose rather than a strict way of speaking, doesn't just dyadically relate to what it signifies. It signifies what it signifies triadically, to or for something else. Always hidden in the sign signified dyad is a third element. The reason why or ground upon which the sign, as you call it, signifies whatever it does signify and not something else.
Give me an example.
I make a noise. Elephant. It is not just a noise, but a word. Why, hearing the noise elephant, do you not think of a thin-legged, long-necked, brown-spotted animal that nibbles leaves instead of a thick-legged, large gray animal with a prehensile proboscis?
Obviously because elephant means elephant and not giraffe.
Yes, of course. But is that not only because of the habit structures internalized in your Innenwelt, which make the noise elephant, a linguistic element in our Lebenswelt, on the basis of which we are habituated to think first on hearing the noise of one particular animal rather than another? So in the experience of any signification, is there not only the sign, loosely so-called, and the signified object, but also the matter of the basis upon which the sign signifies the object rather than or before some other object? Oh, you see that?
I do.
Then you see the relation making what you with your finger point out as sign to be a sign is nothing intrinsic to the so-called sign, but rather something over and above that subjective structure, to wit, a relationship, which has not one term, but two terms, to wit, the signified object for one, and for the other, the reason why that, rather than some other, is the object signified.
I think I do see that. I think. But please explain further so I can be sure.
Well, now here history can be a great help. Animals, including human animals, begin with an experience of objects, and objects normally given as outside of or other than themselves. In order to mature and survive, every animal has to form an interior map, an Innenwelt, which enables it sufficiently to navigate its surroundings, to find food, shelter, etc. This sufficiently is what we call an Umwelt. and it contrasts in principle